Monique laughed. That was the part Amina could never forget. Not Darius's voice. Not the crowd. Not even the sound of her own heartbeat collapsing inside her chest like a building with no foundation. It was Monique's laugh, her best friend's laugh, cutting through the cafeteria noise like something sharp and deliberate. The kind of laugh that said, I knew this would happen, and I wanted to see it. 15 years later, Amina would be standing inside a Blue Ridge mountain cabin with snow pressing against the windows, and Monique would laugh again. Same pitch, same ease, same complete absence of shame. And Amina would finally understand that some people don't change. They just find better settings. But that moment, the cabin, the snow, the man who would walk through that door and change everything, that comes later. First, you need to understand what it costs a woman to rebuild herself from nothing, and what it means when someone who helped tear her down decides 15 years later that they want a front row seat to watch it happen again. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, if you've ever mistaken witness for friendship, stay with this story. Hit that like button right now and drop your city or country in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe if you haven't already, because the things that happen before this night is over will change the way you think about love, loyalty, and what a man who truly loves you is actually willing to do. This is Amina's story, and it starts the way most disasters do, with an invitation she should have declined. The rain had been falling on Atlanta for 3 hours before Amina Brooks finally left the office building on Peachtree Street, her laptop bag pulled over one shoulder and her umbrella already losing a battle with the wind. It was a Wednesday in early February. The lobby of the Whitmore Financial Tower was still full of people finishing late meetings, all of them moving with that particular exhaustion that comes from spending 10 hours under fluorescent light pretending things are going well. Amina moved through them quickly. She was good at that, threading through spaces without drawing attention, making herself compact, disappearing into the edges of rooms. She had spent years perfecting it. She was 33 years old, 5'6", with natural hair she kept pinned back during work hours and let breathe during everything else. She wore a charcoal wrap coat that she had saved 3 months to buy, and low-heeled boots that were slightly damp at the toe from an earlier puddle she'd misjudged on her lunch break. She had a marketing presentation due the following Tuesday, 2 unreturned client calls, and approximately 47 unread emails she was choosing not to think about. What she was thinking about was parking, specifically the underground garage on level B2, where she'd left her car that morning, and whether the elevator was going to be as slow as it had been at noon. It was slower. She wrote it down alone, listening to it groan through 2 floors with the particular patience of someone who has learned that being impatient about small things only makes the day longer. The doors opened into the garage's fluorescent dimness, that flat, gray-white light that makes everything look slightly unreal. And Amina stepped out and turned left toward the row where she'd parked. She was 3 steps into her turn when her laptop bag swung wide as she shifted the strap, and the metal buckle on the bottom corner made contact with the driver's side door of the vehicle beside her own car. The sound was not loud. It was the kind of sound that only matters if you were paying attention, a small metallic kiss, more felt than heard. Amina stopped immediately. She turned. She looked at what she had hit. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, black. The kind of black that seemed to absorb the garage's fluorescent light rather than reflect it. The paint was flawless in the way that things are flawless when someone pays a serious amount of money to keep them that way. And along the edge of the driver's door, just below the handle, there was a mark. Small. Maybe 3 centimeters. The kind of thing that could only be seen from a certain angle, under certain light. Amina saw it clearly. She stood there for a long moment, long enough to feel the full weight of what she was looking at. Not just the scratch, but everything it represented. The cost of the vehicle, the kind of person who owned it, the complete asymmetry between her financial situation and whoever that person was. She took out her phone. She photographed the scratch from 2 angles. She photographed her own car's buckle. She photographed the license plate of the Rolls. Then she stood there for another moment trying to decide whether to leave a note, and if so, what a note even said in a situation like this. I scratched your car. My bag did it. I'm very sorry and also very aware this probably costs more than my monthly rent to fix. She was still composing it in her head when she heard the elevator doors open behind her. The man who walked out was alone. No assistant, no entourage, nobody on the phone. He moved the way certain people move when they're used to rooms rearranging themselves around their presence. Not with arrogance exactly, but with a complete absence of self-consciousness that had the same effect. He was Korean, tall, somewhere in his mid-30s, wearing a suit that had been made specifically for his body. His hair was black and pushed back from his face without quite being styled. There were tattoos on his hands, intricate lines that disappeared under his cuffs, and his eyes, when they landed on her, were very dark and completely still. Amina had a half-formed apology ready. She opened her mouth. He looked past her to the door of the rolls, then back at her. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His English was precise, slightly accented, carrying a formality that didn't read as stiff. It read as careful, like someone who had learned the language from sources that prioritized accuracy over ease. Amina blinked. "What?" "You're holding your arm," he said. "The outside of your elbow. Did you hit something?" She looked down. She was, in fact, holding her elbow. She'd knocked it against her car door when she'd lurched back from the rolls, and she hadn't registered the dull throb until this moment. It wasn't serious. It wasn't even worth mentioning. "I'm fine," she said. No, I'm fine. I scratched your car, the buckle on my bag. There's a mark on the driver's door, and I have photographs if you want them, and I'll pay for whatever it costs to fix it. I want to be upfront about that. I'm not concerned about the car," he said. She stopped talking. He said it without impatience. He said it the way someone states a fact that they have already considered and resolved. His attention moved briefly to the door of the rolls, to the scratch she had indicated, and then back to her face. "It can be repaired," he said. "You cannot." Amina stood very still. "I'm not injured," she said. It's a minor thing." "Then I'm glad." He reached into his jacket and produced a card. Plain white, no logo, just a name in clean sans serif type. Kang Tae-hyun. Below it, a phone number. Nothing else. "If you find that your arm is bothering you later, or if your bag was damaged, contact me." She took the card mostly because her hand moved before her mind did. "I scratched your car," she said again, because she felt the situation needed clarifying. "And you stopped," he said. "You photographed it. You were preparing to leave your contact information." He opened the driver's door of the rolls, the tiny scratch catching the fluorescent light for just a moment. "Most people don't do that." He got in. The door closed with the specific sealed sound of something engineered to perfection. The engine, when it started, was almost silent. Amina stood in the garage holding his card and staring at the space the car had just occupied as it pulled smoothly toward the exit. She looked at the card for a long time. Then she got in her own car, which had a cracked sun visor and a back seat full of presentation printouts, and she drove home through the rain thinking about a man who had looked at a scratch on a Rolls-Royce Phantom and asked if she was hurt. She told herself it meant nothing. She was wrong, but she didn't know that yet. The text came at 10:47 that night. She was on her couch with a bowl of pasta she'd made mostly from what was left in the refrigerator, half a box of linguine, olive oil, garlic, some Parmesan that was close to its limits, and she was reviewing the presentation on her laptop with the television on low in the background. Her phone lit up with a number she didn't have saved. "This is Kang Tae-hyun. I hope the elbow is manageable. If you haven't had dinner, I was going to suggest coffee instead. Tomorrow morning, if you're willing." Amina read it twice. She thought about the fact that she had given him no contact information. She thought about what that meant, that he had found her number through means she hadn't authorized, that someone with access to this building's systems or something more had located her without difficulty. She thought about the card, the car, the tattoos. She thought about the way he had asked if she was hurt before he looked at the damage to a vehicle that cost more than most people's houses. She typed back, "How did you get this number?" The response came in under a minute. "I own the building." Amina stared at the screen. She should have put her phone down. She should have returned to her pasta and her presentation and let the evening be what it was. She had good instincts. She had built a career and a functional adult life on those instincts. And every one of them was currently sending a low, insistent signal that this particular thread was not safe to pull. She typed, "Coffee is fine. Where and when?" She still doesn't have a complete answer for why, except that the question, "Are you hurt?" was still sitting in her chest, quiet and persistent, like something she hadn't finished processing. They met at a small cafe in Midtown that Taehyun had apparently reserved entirely for the hour. Not a back room. The whole cafe. Amina walked in to find it empty, except for one table near the window with 2 cups of coffee already poured, and a man sitting across from the door reading something on his phone with the same focused stillness she had noticed in the garage. He stood when she came in, not performatively, just stood, the way someone does when they were raised to. "You reserved the whole place," she said. "I find it easier to hear what people are saying when there's less noise," he said. "Or maybe you just like controlling your environment." He considered this with what she would come to understand was his characteristic directness. "Both things are true," he said. She sat down. The coffee was excellent. He had apparently communicated preferences she hadn't given him, because hers was exactly what she would have ordered. Oat milk, 1 sugar, no flavor additions. When she mentioned this, he said, "You had a Costa Rica single origin in your office building's cafe at noon. That told me something about your preferences." "You had people watching me?" "I had people check the cafe's loyalty app," he said. "Your account is linked to your office building's employee ID. It was not complicated." Amina looked at him. Most men would not admit that on a first coffee. "I'm not most men," he said. Not as a boast, as information. "I see that." They talked for 2 hours. She learned he was 36. He had come to Atlanta 3 months ago for business he declined to specify. He had grown up in Seoul. His grandmother had raised him after his mother left, and his father worked hours that didn't allow for a child. He cooked. He was allergic to exactly one thing, a specific type of tree pollen, which he mentioned with the mild annoyance of someone who finds the allergy inconvenient and slightly undignified. He had read 6 books in the past month and named them without her asking. He learned. She had grown up in Atlanta. Her parents were both educators, her mother a high school English teacher, her father a college administrator. She had a marketing degree and a client list she had built entirely through referrals because she had never loved the process of cold calling. She was currently renting an apartment in Decatur that she liked because of the light in the kitchen. She was 33. She had one younger sister who lived in Charlotte and called every Sunday without fail. She did not tell him about Valentine's Day. She did not tell him about Darius Cole. She did not tell him about the cafeteria in 2009 and the way sound had seemed to drain out of the room after everyone started laughing. Those were not first coffee details. They were barely any conversation details. She kept them where she always kept them, folded small, placed somewhere toward the back. When she left the cafe, Taehyun walked her to her car. Not her building. Her car, which she had parked 2 blocks away. He walked slightly behind her left shoulder in a way that, she realized later, blocked her from the street traffic side. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "I'm aware," she said. He almost smiled. It wasn't a full thing. It was something that moved across his face quickly and then settled back into its usual controlled expression. But she caught it. She filed it away. "Thursday?" he said. "Wednesday," she said. "I have clients Thursday." "Wednesday," he agreed. She got in her car. She did not let herself look in the rearview mirror until she had turned the corner. When she did, he was still standing exactly where she had left him, watching her go with that perfectly composed stillness. She kept driving. Inside her chest, something that had been locked for a long time shifted slightly. Not open, not yet. Just shifted. Like a door that has been shut so long the frame has swollen, and someone has just laid a hand flat against the wood. Chut. By the 4th week, she had seen him 9 times. Not every meeting was long. Twice he had appeared at the end of her workday, and they had walked for 40 minutes through Piedmont Park without a destination. Once he had left a container of juk, a Korean rice porridge, at her office reception desk with a note that said, only, "You mentioned skipping lunch." Tea. She had eaten it at her desk and spent approximately 10 minutes trying to decide how she felt about a man who paid that level of attention and what it meant that she didn't entirely hate it. She was beginning to notice the things she wasn't supposed to notice. Hotel lobbies that cleared when he walked in. Not rudely, not obviously, but guests would find reasons to step back. Front desk staff would stand slightly straighter, managers would appear from nowhere. A dinner at a restaurant where the chef came to their table not because Taehyun was a food critic, but because it was clear from the quality of his attention that being noticed by him mattered. The man who was always somewhere nearby. Han Seok-jin, mid-30s, quiet in the way that trained people are quiet, always positioned between Tae-hyun and any door. Amina asked about him once. "He works for me," Tae-hyun said. "He follows you everywhere." "He works for me," Tae-hyun said again, with a patience that was almost gentle. She let it go. What she couldn't let go was the phone calls. They happened without warning, ja. His pocket would vibrate, he would glance at the screen, and something in him would shift in a way that had nothing to do with emotional expression. It wasn't coldness exactly. It was more like a door closing. He would excuse himself. He was always back within 4 minutes. When he returned, he was the same man he had been before, attentive, steady, warm in his particular contained way. But for those 4 minutes, she understood that there was an entire world existing parallel to the one she was standing in, and she did not have access to it. She was in the passenger seat of his car one Tuesday evening when it happened. They had eaten Korean food. He had cooked it himself at an apartment he apparently kept on the 34th floor of a building in Buckhead, kitchen that looked like it had been used seriously and recently, which surprised her in a way she realized was a kind of small prejudice she hadn't examined. The call came at 9:17 p.m. He glanced at the screen and his face went still in that particular way. "I need to take this," he said. "One moment." He was back in 3 minutes and 40 seconds. She had been counting without deciding to. "I'm sorry," he said. "You don't have to apologize," she said. "I do," he said, "because you noticed." She looked at him. "There are parts of my life," he said carefully, "that I cannot explain to you, not yet, possibly not for a long time. I want you to know that I understand what I'm asking when I say that, and I'm not asking it casually." Amina was quiet for a moment. "Are you dangerous?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. He kept his eyes on the Atlanta skyline through the windshield. "Not to you," he said. "Never to you." She thought about that. She thought about the hotel lobbies and Seok-jin and the way wealthy men deferred to him with something that wasn't just social respect. It was something older and more physical than that, the kind of deference that comes from knowing what someone is capable of. She thought about the juke on her desk and the 2-hour coffee and the way he walked on the street side without making a performance of it. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "Okay?" "I'm not running," she said, "but I'm also not pretending I don't have questions. When you're ready to answer them, I'll be ready to hear it." Something moved across his face. Not the almost smile this time. Something less controlled than that. Something that looked briefly and unmistakably like relief. He didn't say anything. He reached across the console and took her hand. Not romantically, or not only romantically, with the specific weight of someone who has held themselves apart from other people for long enough that the act of reaching carries its own kind of meaning. They drove through Atlanta's nighttime streets in silence, her hand in his, the city lights moving past the windows in long streaks of amber and white. Amina kept her face forward, but inside she was quietly, carefully, against every piece of advice her better judgment had been accumulating for 15 years, beginning to fall. It terrified her. She fell anyway. The call from Monique came on a Tuesday, 3 weeks before Valentine's Day. Amina and Monique had been friends since sophomore year of college, 10 years of birthday calls and emergency venting sessions, and the kind of low-maintenance friendship that doesn't require constant contact to feel real. Or so Amina had believed. She had not been examining it closely. She had been busy with her clients and her presentations and the new, strange, quietly consuming fact of Kang Tae-hyun. "I'm planning a Valentine's girls' trip," Monique said. "Blue Ridge Mountains. I rented a cabin. It's gorgeous, seriously, hot tub, fireplace, the whole thing. A few people, nothing big. You in?" Amina hesitated. Valentine's Day. She had avoided it for 15 years with the consistency of someone who has identified a specific hazard and simply stopped walking near it. She didn't make elaborate excuses. She didn't perform bitterness about it. She just didn't engage. Stayed home, ordered food, got through it. "Who else is coming?" she asked. Monique named 3 people. 2 women Amina knew casually, one she liked. She didn't name anyone else. "It'll be good for you," Monique said. "You've been working so much. Come decompress." Amina thought about the mountain, the fireplace, the idea of 2 days without her laptop. "Okay," she said. "Yeah, I'll come." She would spend a long time later thinking about that moment, about how easy it was, about how nothing in Monique's voice had given it away. No hesitation, no particular warmth to compensate for guilt, no tell at all. Just the easy voice of someone who had been her friend for a decade and knew exactly what to say to make her say yes. She would think about it, and she would hate how simple it had been. But that was later. On that Tuesday in February, she said, "Okay," and she meant it, and she had no idea that somewhere Monique was already texting someone else, a name from a long time ago, a face from a cafeteria in 2009, telling him she's coming, it'll be perfect. She had no idea. She just said okay, and went back to her presentation, and outside her apartment window, Atlanta was doing what Atlanta does in February, cold and stubborn and gray at the edges. And she was thinking, without quite letting herself think it, about a man with still dark eyes who cooked from memory and reached for her hand without explanation. She was thinking about how much her life had changed in 6 weeks. She didn't know yet that it was about to change again. The drive to Blue Ridge took 2 hours and 40 minutes. Amina knew because she watched the clock on her dashboard with the specific attention of someone who has learned that monitoring small, controllable things can create the illusion of managing the larger ones. She had packed light, a weekend bag, her toiletries, 1 good sweater, and 2 she didn't care about. She had told Tae-hyun she was going on a girls' trip. He had asked no questions, which she had appreciated. He had said, "Text me when you arrive," which she had also appreciated, though she wasn't ready yet to examine why. The mountains came up slowly the way they always do in North Georgia. The land just begins tilting, almost imperceptibly, and then the trees get taller and the sky gets smaller, and you realize without being able to name the exact moment it happened that you are somewhere different than where you started. The cabin was everything Monique had described. Long, low, built from dark timber, with a wraparound porch and a wood-stacked fire pit and windows that caught the late afternoon light and held it. A hot tub sat off the left side of the porch, steam rising from it in the cold air. The mountains behind it were bare and gray-blue, winter trees against a sky that had been promising snow since Gainesville. Amina pulled in behind Monique's white SUV and sat for a moment with the engine running. She was already tired. Not from the drive, from something that had started the moment she'd turned onto the final road and seen the cabin in the distance. A low, specific unease she couldn't fully name. The feeling of arriving somewhere and immediately wanting to leave without being able to say why. She got out. The air was cold and clean and smelled like pine and coming rain. Monique appeared on the porch before Amina had her bag out of the trunk, arms open, smile already running at full wattage. "You made it," Monique said. "I made it," Amina said. They hugged. Monique smelled like the perfume she'd worn since college, something warm and amber-based, and for a moment Amina let the familiarity of it settle her. 10 years. 10 years of that smell attached to the idea of safety. "Come inside," Monique said. "Everyone's already here." Everyone. Amina followed her through the front door and into a main room that opened across a wide stone fireplace, already lit, throwing gold light against the timber walls. 2 women from Monique's description were there, Jade, who Amina liked, and Priya, who she knew less well but had always found warm. They were on the couch with glasses of wine, mid-conversation, and they looked up and said the right welcoming things. And then Amina's eyes moved past them, to the kitchen counter on the far side of the room, where a man stood with his back half turned, pouring something into a glass. He turned at the sound of the door. She felt it before she processed it, something physical, a locking up of the chest, a sudden shallowing of breath that had nothing to do with the cold she'd just walked in from. Her feet kept moving because her feet didn't get the message in time. 2 more steps into the room before her brain caught up and issued the full stop. Darius Cole. 33 years old, still broad through the shoulders, still wearing the particular ease of someone who had never in his entire life walked into a room wondering if he belonged there. His hair was cut close, his jaw was sharper than it had been at 17, and he was looking at her with an expression that she could only describe as anticipation. Not guilt, not discomfort, The look of a man who has been told something is going to happen and is curious to see how it unfolds. "Amina," he said, like a greeting, like a thing he'd been holding ready. She turned to Monique. Monique was watching her with an expression that took Amina 2 full seconds to decode, because it was so layered and so practiced that it almost passed for concern. Almost. "Surprise," Monique said softly. The fireplace popped. Somewhere outside, a wind picked up and moved through the trees with a low, heavy sound. Amina took a breath. One full breath from the bottom, the kind she had taught herself to take in situations where her instinct was to either freeze or run. "I'm going to put my bag in my room," she said. Her voice came out even. She was proud of that later. Monique showed her to a room at the back of the cabin, a queen bed, a window that looked out at the mountain behind, a small bathroom. Amina set her bag on the bed. She stood in the center of the room for a moment with her hands at her sides, feeling her own heartbeat in her fingertips. Then she took out her phone. She almost called Tae-hyun. She got as far as finding his name before she stopped herself. She didn't know what she would say. She didn't know how to explain the specific weight of this particular thing. Not to someone else, maybe not to anyone. There are some histories that resist being summarized, that lose their essential shape the moment you try to give them a beginning and an end. What happened with Darius Cole was one of them. She put her phone in her pocket. She went back out. Yes, dinner was pasta and red wine in the cabin's kitchen table, and for the first hour Amina managed it. She talked to Jade about Jade's job, which had recently changed. She talked to Priya about a trip Priya had taken to Portugal. She accepted wine and kept the glass mostly full, sipping slowly, keeping her hands occupied. Darius was at the opposite end of the table. He was charming in the way he had always been charming, easy, comfortable, the kind of presence that takes up space without seeming to try. He talked about Atlanta real estate, which apparently he was in now. He made people laugh. He was, by any observable standard, having a fine evening. He kept looking at Amina. Not constantly, not obviously, but with a regularity that she felt in the side of her face, the way you feel a light that's slightly too bright even when you're not looking directly at it. Monique was watching too, more carefully than Darius, with an attention that was quieter and more interested. The first thing happened around the end of the main course. Someone, Priya probably, trying to fill a lull, asked how everyone knew each other, the kind of gentle conversational prompt that is supposed to generate easy answers. Darius smiled. "Amina and I go way back," he said. "High school." "Really?" Jade said. "Lakeside High," he said. He looked across the table at Amina. "We go way back, don't we?" It wasn't a question. Amina took a sip of her wine. "We went to the same school," she said. "Same school," Darius repeated, as if she had said something slightly inaccurate that he was too polite to correct. Amina was, she was unforgettable, even back then. He said it with a warmth that was calibrated to sound like a compliment, the kind that is angled just precisely enough that you can't object to it without sounding oversensitive. Amina set her glass down. "That's kind," she said flatly. "I mean it." He leaned back slightly in his chair, casual, in control of the room's rhythm. "She had this way of just going for things, very brave." He paused, one beat too long. Even when it didn't work out. The table absorbed it differently. Priya didn't know, so it landed as nothing. Jade looked uncertain. Monique was very still, watching Amina's face with the focus of someone at a sporting event waiting for the moment the score changes. Amina felt it move through her. The old thing, the exact shape of it, the sensation of being watched while something is being done to her, and being expected to absorb it with grace. "Can I help clear the plates?" Amina asked. She stood before anyone answered and started collecting dishes, moving into the kitchen, putting her back to the table. She ran hot water over her hands at the sink, even though nothing needed washing yet. The water was very hot. She let it run. From the table behind her, she heard Darius start a different story about something else entirely, and the conversation shifted, and within 2 minutes, the dining room sounded normal again. Monique appeared at her elbow. "He's harmless," Monique said quietly. "He's grown up a lot." Amina turned off the water. She dried her hands on a dish towel that had a faded pattern of blue stripes. "Why is he here, Monique?" I told you, I wanted a group trip. Darius is part of my... Why is he here? Amina said again. Same words, different weight. Monique looked at her with an expression that was close to sincerity, close enough that Amina almost let it work. I thought it would be healing, Monique said, for you to see that it was just high school stuff, that it doesn't have to mean anything anymore. Amina looked at her for a long moment. That's very thoughtful of you, she said. She walked back to the table. She texted Tae-hyun at 9:47 p.m. from the back porch, with the cold pushing in through her sweater and the tree line black against a sky that had gone the color of pewter. Arrived fine. How's Atlanta? He responded in 2 minutes, which was faster than his average. She'd noticed he had an average. She hadn't meant to, but she had. Quiet. Dokjin is convinced it's going to snow there before morning. He checks weather apps compulsively. He's not wrong, she typed. Are you all right? She stood there with the phone in both hands, the cold settling around her like a second coat. She typed, It's fine, just tired from the drive. She stared at what she'd written. It was accurate as far as it went. She sent it. His response came back fast again. Okay, sleep well. And then, after a pause, I mean that. She put the phone in her pocket and stood outside for a few more minutes, watching the darkness where the mountains were, even though she couldn't see them. Somewhere in the trees something moved. An animal, a branch, the wind with a slightly different current. The sound was brief and then gone. She went back inside. The second day was harder. Snow had come in overnight, not heavy, a thin covering that turned the mountain outside the kitchen window into something quietly beautiful. And Amina woke early and sat with coffee in the main room before anyone else appeared, watching it through the glass, letting herself have 20 minutes that were just hers. Then Darius came out in a gray sweatshirt and poured himself coffee and sat down at the other end of the couch without asking if she minded. Early riser, he said. Always have been, she said. She kept her eyes on the window. Me too. He wrapped both hands around his mug. Listen, Amina, you don't have to, she said. I want to. Darius. She finally looked at him. I've been managing this for 15 years. I don't need you to do anything this morning. He held her gaze. His expression shifted into something that was, she had to admit, something closer to genuine discomfort than she'd expected from him. I handled it badly, he said. What happened? I was 17 and I handled it very badly. Yes, she said. You did. I've thought about it. I'm sure you have, she said. Not sarcastically, just evenly. The way you speak when you have decided that you are not going to give someone the satisfaction of your anger or the performance of your wound. He nodded slowly. He didn't push it further, which surprised her. He sat with his coffee and looked at the snow and was, for the first time since she'd arrived, simply quiet. She let it be quiet. But the quiet didn't last because Monique came out 15 minutes later and immediately said, Oh, good, you're both up, in a tone that suggested she had hoped for exactly this and had only just restrained herself from manufacturing it. By afternoon, Amina had mapped the geometry of what Monique was doing. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't cruel in any way she could point to and name directly. It was a series of small calibrations, a comment here, a question there, the kind of social architecture that requires proximity and patience and a very detailed understanding of where someone's soft tissue is. Monique knew Amina better than almost anyone. She had been given access to that knowledge over a decade of friendship, and she was using it with a precision that was, in its way, more disturbing than anything obvious would have been. At lunch, she mentioned, casually, a client pitch Amina had lost in October. That big campaign you were up for, the one that went to someone else, framing it as sympathy but landing it in front of Darius at the exact moment that maximized its weight. At one point, she said, Amina's always been so private about her love life. We barely even know who she's seeing. And then watched Amina's face with an interest that was slightly too focused for the offhand delivery. Small things, each one defensible in isolation. Together, a pattern. Amina recognized it because she was not, and had never been, stupid. What she was doing now was trying to figure out why. What moved a woman who had been her friend for 10 years to take a trip to the mountains and spend it quietly disassembling her? She didn't have the answer yet. She carried the question like a stone in her pocket all afternoon. Jade found her on the porch at 4 o'clock with a second glass of wine and an expression that said she had noticed something and wasn't sure whether to name it. "You okay?" Jade said. "Fine," Amina said. Jade sat down beside her. She didn't push it, which was one of the things Amina liked about her. They sat for a while. The snow had mostly stopped, and the mountain was doing what mountains do in the late afternoon in February, turning very still, very cold, very much itself. "I didn't know he was going to be here," Jade said finally. "Monique didn't tell me." Amina looked at her. "I would have told you," Jade said. "If I'd known." Amina nodded. "I believe you. Is there history?" "There's history," Amina said. Jade waited. "High school," Amina said. "I told him how I felt about him. In front of a lot of people. He didn't respond well." Jade was quiet for a moment. "How didn't he respond well?" "He laughed," Amina said, "and then everyone else did too." She said it simply, without inflection, the way you describe weather. "And Monique was there. She was standing right there when it happened." Jade absorbed that. "She was your friend then too?" Jade said carefully. "We met junior year," Amina said. "So yes." The silence between them was different now, the kind that has weight. "Amina," Jade started. "Don't," Amina said. Not harshly. "I'm figuring it out. I just need to get through tonight." Jade nodded. She reached over and squeezed Amina's arm once, brief and firm, and then let go. They sat with the mountain until the light started failing. Dinner that night was heavier, Bohm. A stew Monique had made, good bread, more wine. The fireplace was going hard. Outside, the temperature had dropped and the trees were moving in a wind that had picked up after sunset. Amina ate. She kept her posture open, her expression neutral. She had learned this, how to take up space in a room without drawing fire, how to be present without being a target. She had learned it young, and she had gotten very good at it. But Darius had had more wine by this point, and something in the looseness of the evening, the fire, the warmth, the particular comfort of feeling like the most powerful person in a room, made him expansive. "You know what I was thinking about today?" he said, addressing the table generally. "Valentine's Day in high school. Remember how serious everything felt? Like everything was life or death." Monique smiled. "It was dramatic," she agreed. "I had this situation junior year," Darius said. "Girl told me she was in love with me, in the middle of the cafeteria, like, stood up in front of everyone." He shook his head, nostalgic, apparently amused by his own memory. "I was so not ready for that." Priya laughed softly. "Oh, that's rough." "Young love," Monique said. Amina looked at her plate. "I feel bad now," Darius said. "I was not gracious about it, but I was 17, you know?" The table agreed. The table was sympathetic to the difficulties of being 17. The table had not been the girl standing in the cafeteria. "I'm sure she's over it," Priya said kindly. Amina felt Monique's eyes on her face. She picked up her wine glass. She took a slow sip. She set it back down with her fingers very steady. "Who wants more bread?" she said. Nobody called it what it was. Nobody said her name. It was a story about a girl who no longer existed in this room, a girl who had been replaced by a composed woman in a good sweater who knew how to manage table conversation. She held it together through the rest of dinner. She held it together through the clearing of plates and the move to the couches and the first 20 minutes of whatever television show somebody found. She excused herself at 9, said she was tired from the drive, said goodnight with the right warmth to the right people. In her room, she sat on the edge of the bed with her hands in her lap and felt the particular exhaustion of a body that has been held at controlled tension for 2 days. Her phone lit up. Tae-hyun. Still awake? She stared at the screen. She thought about typing something reassuring. She thought about, yes, just tired. She thought about the careful, managed version of herself that she had been performing since yesterday afternoon. She typed, "Something happened. Not emergency. Just, I need to tell you something when I get back." 3 seconds. Then his name appeared at the top of the screen. He was calling, not texting. She answered. "Tell me now," he said. His voice was exactly what it was. Quiet, direct, carrying that particular quality of absolute attention. And something in her, something that had been clenched since she walked through the cabin's front door and saw Darius standing at the kitchen counter, came slightly loose. "There's someone here," she said. "Someone from high school. Monique invited him without telling me, and I think she did it on purpose, and I think I've known for about 2 days, and I keep looking for a reason it's not true because I don't want it to be true." The line was quiet. "His name is Darius," she said, "and 15 years ago he humiliated me in front of our entire school on Valentine's Day. And Monique was there. She watched it happen, and now she has organized an entire weekend around putting us in the same cabin, and I am sitting in my room trying to understand what I did to deserve that from someone who was supposed to be my friend." Her voice stayed level all the way through it. She was proud of that too. Taehyun said nothing for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had not changed in volume, but something in the texture of it had shifted. The way a temperature shifts, something that is almost not detectable until you realize the room is several degrees colder than it was. "Are you safe?" he said. "Yes," she said. "It's not like that. It's social. It's just mean. Are you ready to leave?" "I'm not going to leave," she said. "I'm not going to let her see that." Another pause. "Okay," he said, accepting it without pushing. "Then tell me what you need." She thought about it. "I just needed to say it out loud to someone," she said. "To someone who—" She stopped. "To someone who what?" he said. "To someone who is on my side," she said quietly. The words felt too simple for what they meant. She said them anyway. "I am," he said. And the way he said it, unhurried, without emphasis, like stating something that required no performance to be true, settled something in her that had been unsettled for 2 days. They stayed on the phone without talking for a few minutes. She could hear him breathing. She could hear faintly the sound of Atlanta in the background. Traffic somewhere, the ambient noise of a city that never fully quieted. "I'll see you Sunday," she said finally. "Sunday," he agreed. She hung up. She held the phone in her lap in the quiet of the mountain cabin room. Outside, the wind moved through the trees with that same low, heavy sound she had heard the night before. And in the walls of the cabin, something creaked and settled. And Amina sat with her own stillness for a moment, before she lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling and thought about what Monique had done and felt the knowledge of it settle into something clear and cold and final. She had come to the mountains expecting rest. What she had found instead was the specific, irreversible clarity that comes when someone shows you who they are without meaning to. The clarity that doesn't allow for revision, that cannot be walked back into the comfortable haze of benefit of the doubt. Monique had done this deliberately. Amina knew it the way she knew things that lived in the body before they lived in the mind, in the chest, in the shoulders, in the controlled steadiness she'd been maintaining for 48 hours, with the discipline of someone who has survived things by refusing to fall apart in front of the wrong audience. She knew it, and the knowing meant there was no going back to what it had been, no smoothing the surface back over, no waking up tomorrow and choosing not to see what she had already seen. The friendship was over. She just hadn't said it yet. The hardest part wasn't the grief of that, though the grief was there, real and sharp, a decade of mornings and phone calls and the amber-based perfume of someone she had trusted. The hardest part was that she still had one more night in this cabin. One more dinner, one more morning, one more performance of composure in a room where someone was waiting, with patience and with pleasure, to watch her break. She closed her eyes. Somewhere outside in the mountain dark, snow had begun to fall again. She didn't sleep. Not the way sleep is supposed to work. The body releasing, the mind going quiet, the hours passing without witness. She lay on top of the covers with her coat pulled over her like a blanket, because the room had gotten cold in the night and she hadn't bothered with the thermostat. She lay there and watched the ceiling and listened to the cabin making its sounds, the wind pressing at the windows, the occasional creak of the floor joists, the distant settling of timber that old buildings do in the cold, like a body turning over in its sleep. At 3 a.m., she got up and stood at the window. The snow was still falling, thin and steady, the kind that doesn't declare itself but accumulates anyway, covering everything incrementally until you look out in the morning and can't find the shapes you knew the night before. The tree line was a dark blur. The mountain was invisible. The porch railing had become a white stripe in the darkness. She stood there for a long time, with her arms crossed over her chest and her forehead almost touching the glass. She was thinking about a Valentine's Day in 2009. She had been 17. She had worn a red sweater she'd borrowed from her sister because she'd wanted to look like someone who had made an effort without making it obvious she'd made an effort. She had rehearsed what she wanted to say for 2 weeks. Not a speech, not a grand gesture, just a few sentences. Simple. Honest. She had believed with the particular certainty of a 17-year-old who has confused proximity for intimacy and attentiveness for interest, that Darius Cole looked at her the way she looked at him. She had waited until the lunch period when the cafeteria was at its loudest and most distracted. She had thought the noise would give her cover. She had not understood that the noise was also an audience. She had walked to where he was sitting with 6 of his friends. She had said his name. He had looked up. She had said the things she had prepared. She remembered his expression changing, the way it moved from mild surprise to something else, something that, even at 17, she had recognized as performance. The slight widening of the eyes for the benefit of the people around him, the beginning of a smile that wasn't warm. He had said, "Amina, come on." Just that. Come on. Like she was doing something embarrassing, like she had misread a basic social contract and he was patiently declining to be cruel about it. But then he had looked at the friend beside him, and that friend had laughed. And the laugh had moved around the table and then outward, the way sound moves in a cafeteria, finding every corner. She had stood there for approximately 4 seconds before she walked away. She had not run. She had not cried until she was in the second-floor bathroom with the door locked. She had sat on the floor of a bathroom stall and pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes and listened to herself breathe unevenly for about 10 minutes. Then she had gotten up, washed her hands, gone to her afternoon classes. She had not spoken of it again. Not to her mother, not to her sister, not to anyone. What she had done was file it in a place she thought was sealed and build a series of careful structures around it. The professionalism, the self-containment, the very specific avoidance of Valentine's Day, and tell herself that sealed things stay sealed if you don't touch them. She was 33 years old and standing at a window in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the sealed thing was open and she was standing in the spill of it. She went back to bed at 4:15. She did not sleep. Morning came gray and muted, the snow having tapered to nothing in the night, the sky the flat white of a page with nothing written on it yet. Amina showered. She dressed carefully, dark jeans, a deep burgundy sweater, her good boots. She did her hair with attention. She applied her makeup with the deliberateness of someone suiting up. She was not going to walk out of that room looking like someone who had spent the night coming apart. She was going to walk out of that room looking like herself. She walked out. Monique was already in the kitchen, standing at the stove with a pan of eggs and the practiced warmth of a woman who has decided this morning is going to be normal. She looked up when Amina appeared and smiled with her whole face. "Morning," Monique said. "Coffee's ready. How'd you sleep?" "Fine," Amina said. She poured herself coffee. She kept her back to the room for a moment while she did it. "I was thinking we could do the hot tub this morning," Monique said, "before everyone heads out. The snow made everything look incredible." "Sure," Amina said. Priya came in, then Jade, then Darius, who moved through the kitchen with the ease of a man who has never in his life felt unwelcome anywhere, and poured his coffee and said good morning to the room in a way that managed to include Amina without making it pointed. They ate breakfast. Amina ate. She drank her coffee. She answered the questions directed at her. She did not perform warmth that wasn't there, but she didn't perform its absence either. She had found, at some point in the night, a very still place inside herself. Not calm exactly, not peace, but something more like the flat surface of a lake right before weather moves in. Everything held, everything quiet, everything waiting. It was while she was rinsing her plate at the sink that she heard it. The conversation had shifted. Darius and Monique were at the kitchen table with their mugs and the easy, comfortable body language of people who know each other better than they've let on. And Amina was at the sink with the water running and her back to them, and they had apparently calculated that between the running water and the distance, she couldn't hear clearly. They had miscalculated. "She held up better than I expected," Darius said, low. "She always does," Monique said. There was something in her voice, not quite pride, not quite affection, but something that had those shapes and was made of something else entirely. "That's the thing about Amina. She holds it together, makes it harder to see when it gets to her." "You think it got to her?" "Last night at dinner?" A brief pause, the sound of a mug being set down. "Oh, it got to her. She went still. I know that still." Amina turned off the water. She stood at the sink with her hands wet, and her plate in the rack in the kitchen behind her, and she did not move. "Think she knows you set it up?" Darius asked. "She suspects," Monique said. "She's too smart not to, but she won't say anything. She never says anything. That's her thing. She processes it privately and then acts like nothing happened. It's very controlled and very exhausting to watch, honestly." Darius made a small sound, something between acknowledgement and amusement. Amina turned around. She dried her hands on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle. She did it slowly. She folded the towel back with the same care. She looked at Monique. Monique looked up and saw her face and went very still. Jade was at the far end of the kitchen table with her phone. She looked up at the quality of the silence. Priya was somewhere else in the cabin. The room had the population of 3 women and 1 man and an enormous amount of recently shifted air pressure. "How long?" Amina said. Monique's expression didn't crumble. It adjusted. It found something that looked like wounded surprise, a micro-performance so practiced that Amina would have believed it 3 days ago. "Amina, how long have you been doing this?" Amina said. "Not just this weekend. How long?" "I don't know what you think you heard." "Monique." Her voice was flat and very quiet and completely steady. "Don't." The word landed in the kitchen like something dropped from a height. Monique's expression shifted again. Something in it gave up the performance. Not all of it, not the composure, but the pretense of not understanding. She looked for a moment like herself, whatever that was. "I needed to see," Monique said. Amina waited. "I needed to see if it was real," Monique said. "What you have now. This man, this life, this—" She made a small gesture with one hand that encompassed nothing and everything. "You have everything, Amina. You've always had everything. And you don't even see it. You walk around with your career and your apartment and now this man who looks at you like you're the only person in a room, and you don't even—" "Stop," Amina said. "I just wanted to see if you'd fall apart," Monique said. And her voice, at the end of it, came out with a rawness that was the only honest thing she had said all weekend. "I wanted to see if any of it could touch you, because nothing ever seems to. Because you just hold it together and keep going. And I've been watching you do that for 10 years, and I don't understand how, and it makes you angry," Amina said. Monique looked at her. "Not at me," Amina said. "You're angry at yourself, and it's easier to organize a weekend around watching me hurt than it is to figure out why." Jade had gone completely still at the end of the table. Darius was looking at his mug. "That's not—" Monique started. "You knew about the cafeteria," Amina said. "You were there. You never said a word about it. Not that day. Not in the 15 years since. You just stored it. And when you needed something to use, you had it." She picked up her coffee mug from the counter. She took a sip. "That's not a friend," she said. "That's someone who kept receipts." Monique's eyes went bright in a way that might have been tears or might have been something harder. "I've been your friend for 10 years. "I know," Amina said. "That's what makes it worse." She walked out of the kitchen. She went to her room. She zipped her bag shut with efficiency, and she moved through the familiar motions of gathering her things. Charger from the wall, toiletries from the bathroom counter, the book she hadn't opened. And she worked steadily and without rushing, because rushing would mean the thing in her chest was moving and she was not ready for it to move yet. She had her coat on and her bag on her shoulder when her phone rang. Not Taehyun's number. Unknown. She almost didn't answer. She answered. "Ms. Brooks?" A man's voice, formal, quiet, a slight accent she couldn't immediately place. "My name is Han Seok-jin. I work with Kang Tae-hyun. He asked me to call you directly. She stopped moving. Why isn't he calling himself? A brief pause. He is currently occupied with a matter that requires his full attention. He wanted you to know that he is aware of the situation at the cabin. The back of her neck went cold. What does he know? She said carefully. He knows that the weekend was arranged deliberately, Seok-jin said. He knows the identity of the man who was invited and the circumstances from your shared history. He wants you to know that he is handling something from this end and that he will explain it to you in full when he sees you. Handling what? Amina said. I'm not in a position to give you details over the phone, Seok-jin said. What I can tell you is that you are not in any danger and that he asks you to trust him for approximately a pause, as if checking something. 6 more hours. The room was very quiet around her. 6 hours, she said. Yes. She sat down on the edge of the bed. Her bag slid off her shoulder and landed on the floor, and she left it there. Is he all right? She asked. He is, Seok-jin said. He will be at the cabin by this evening. He doesn't need to come here. Miss Brooks, Seok-jin said, and there was something in his voice, not quite warmth, but something adjacent to respect. He is already on his way. The call ended. She sat with the phone in her hand for a long moment. The cabin around her was still doing its morning things. She could hear Jade's voice somewhere, low, and the sound of the back door opening and closing as someone went onto the porch. The fire in the main room had burned down and not yet been tended. She thought about what Seok-jin had said. He is aware of the situation. The specificity of it, the fact that Tae-hyun had information she hadn't given him, the fact that Seok-jin had used the word handling. She thought about all the things she hadn't asked directly in 6 weeks because she had decided to accept not knowing. She thought about hotel lobbies and phone calls and the particular quality of deference that certain people paid to Kang Tae-hyun without being asked. She had told herself she was being open-minded. She had told herself she was trusting someone because trust was a choice and she had chosen it. But sitting in a mountain cabin bedroom with her bag on the floor and a call from a man she had never met informing her that her boyfriend had intelligence on her weekend before she'd fully processed it herself, she understood that there was a significant difference between choosing not to know something and simply not having been told. She picked up her bag. She walked back out. The main room was quiet when she came through. Monique was on the couch with her coffee, not looking at the fire. Darius had apparently gone upstairs. Jade was at the window with her phone, not on it, just holding it. Amina sat down in the chair closest to the fire. She held her mug. She looked at the flames and said nothing. Jade glanced at her and then away, with the instinct of someone who knows that certain silences want company, but not conversation. Monique, after a while, said, Amina. Not yet, Amina said. Monique closed her mouth. The fire burned. Outside, the light had changed. The flat white sky was taking on a slight bronze quality, the way winter skies do in the afternoon, and the shadows on the snow outside the windows had gone blue at the edges. Amina sat with the fire and the cold mug and the understanding, which was settling into her now, with the patient thoroughness of something that has been waiting to arrive, that she was in the middle of a day that was going to require things of her she hadn't anticipated needing. She thought about Tae-hyun on his way here. She thought about what handling meant in the context of a man whose presence cleared hotel lobbies and whose bodyguard spoke to her like he was reading from a prepared briefing. She thought about the moment in his car when she had asked if he was dangerous and he had looked at the Atlanta skyline and said, "Not to you." She believed that. She had believed it then and she believed it now, which was the thing that both simplified and complicated everything. Because the world she had been standing at the edge of for 6 weeks, the one she had been choosing not to look at directly, the one that existed in the spaces between his answered and unanswered questions. She understood now that she was no longer at the edge of it. Somewhere in the past 48 hours, while she'd been managing Monique and Darius and the specific humiliation of a curated weekend, she had stepped across a line she hadn't seen. She was inside it now. And when Kang Tae-hyun walked through that cabin door, she was going to have to decide, without the comfort of vagueness, who she was in relation to everything he actually was. She stared at the fire. Her hands, wrapped around the cold mug, were perfectly still. Outside, the light kept changing, and somewhere on a mountain road that wound up from the valley below, a black car was moving through the late afternoon towards a cabin where a woman sat with a cold cup of coffee and the full, unsparing weight of a truth she could no longer choose not to carry. Juan. He arrived at 6:43 p.m. She knew because she had been watching the window for the last 40 minutes with the specific attention of someone who has decided to stop pretending they're not watching. The light had gone mostly out of the sky by then, the mountains dissolving into the dark, the cabin windows throwing squares of amber light out across the snow. The headlights appeared first, moving slowly up the drive. One vehicle. The lights cut out before the car fully stopped, and for a moment there was just the dark shape of it in the driveway. And then the driver's door opened. Taehan got out. He was wearing a black cashmere coat, no hat, no concession to the cold that was visible from the window. He moved across the snow with the same unhurried directness she had watched him move through every space he'd ever occupied in her presence. Behind him, the passenger side opened and Seokjin emerged and stayed by the car, hands loose at his sides, already positioned between his principal and the tree line. Amina stood up from her chair. Darius, who had come back downstairs at some point in the last hour, saw the headlights through the window and said, "Someone else joining?" to the room in general. Nobody answered him. The knock at the door was 3 beats, even and unhurried. Amina crossed the room and opened it. Taehyun was standing on the porch with the cold coming off him and snow caught in his hair and his dark eyes finding her immediately, before anything else in the room. "You came," she said. "Yes," he said. Just that. As if it were the simplest thing. As if it required no explanation because it required no decision. Because there had never been another possibility once he knew she was here and something was wrong. She stepped back to let him in. He came through the door and the room changed the way rooms changed around him. Not dramatically, not through any particular action, but through something atmospheric, a shift in the quality of attention, like a barometric change you feel in your ears before you understand that the weather has turned. Monique looked up from the couch and went very still. Darius looked up, and something in his face made a small, involuntary adjustment, the expression of a man whose body has registered something before his confidence has had a chance to override it. Taehyun looked at neither of them. He looked at Amina, and then he placed one hand at the small of her back. Not a grip, not a claim, just the quiet, specific weight of a hand that knows where it belongs. And she felt something in her chest that had been braced for 48 hours come very slightly undone. "Are you ready to tell me everything?" he said, low, for her alone. She looked at him. She thought about 6 weeks, about all the things she had known and hadn't asked about, and all the things she had almost known and chosen not to push. She thought about "not to you and I am," and "trust me" for 6 hours. She thought about what it meant to be standing in a mountain cabin with his hand at her back and a room full of people who had just learned, from the quality of his arrival alone, that the equation of this weekend had fundamentally changed. "I'm ready," she said, and from across the room, Monique's face arranged itself into something that was trying to be composed, and Darius's hand tightened around his glass, and the fire burned on, indifferent, casting its uneven gold light across the walls of a cabin, where, for the first time since she'd arrived, Amina Brooks did not feel like the most exposed person in the room. He didn't sit down. That was the first thing the room noticed. Amina moved to the chair she had been occupying for most of the afternoon, and Taehyun stood slightly behind her left shoulder, his coat still on, his hands at his sides. Not aggressive, not theatrical. Simply positioned. The way a person positions themselves when they have assessed a space and made a decision about it. Seokjin was still outside. Amina had watched him through the window as Taehyun came in. He had moved to the left side of the porch and stood there with his hands loose and his face toward the tree line, as though the mountain itself required monitoring. Monique recovered fastest. She always had. It was one of the things Amina had admired about her, the speed of her social recalibration, the ability to find footing in a room that had shifted. She set her coffee mug on the side table and sat up slightly and directed her smile at Taehyun with the full wattage of it. "I don't think we've met," Monique said. "I'm Monique. Amina's friend. Taehyun looked at her. He didn't respond immediately. The pause wasn't rude. It wasn't the pause of someone searching for words. It was the pause of someone who has heard a thing and is deciding whether to address it directly or simply let it stand in the room and be what it is. I know who you are, he said. Monique's smile held, barely. Darius, on the far couch, set his glass down on the coffee table with a sound that was slightly too deliberate. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at Taehyun with the expression of a man who has spent his entire adult life being the most important person in whatever room he was in and has not yet fully processed that tonight is different. Long drive up, Darius said. Helicopter, Taehyun said. He looked at Darius for exactly as long as was necessary to make the word land, and then looked away. Something moved through the room. Jade, on the far end of the couch, pressed her lips together and looked at the fire. Priya had gone to the kitchen at some point in the last 20 minutes and had not come back, which Amina respected as a survival instinct. Amina herself sat with both feet on the floor and her hands in her lap and watched the fire. She was very tired. She had been tired since 3 a.m., and the tiredness had moved through several phases by now. It had been sharp and then heavy, and now it had gone clean, the way exhaustion goes clean on the other side of a threshold, when the body gives up managing its own resistance and just carries you forward on something more fundamental. She was not going to perform anything tonight. She had decided that in the moment, Taehyun's hand had settled at the small of her back. She had performed enough this weekend for several lifetimes, and she was done. Dinner was going to happen. Monique had said so earlier in the relentlessly forward-moving way Monique managed situations. I've got a stew going. We'll eat at 7. And the stew was apparently still going because the smell of it had been threading through the cabin for the past hour, and the cabin's clock on the wall above the fireplace said 6:58. Taehyun finally moved. He took off his coat and draped it over the back of the chair without making a production of it, and sat down in the chair beside Amina's. He sat the way he always sat, completely still, completely present, with the kind of physical economy that reads as either extreme calm or extreme readiness, depending on what you know about the person. He leaned slightly toward her. Have you eaten anything today? She thought about it. Breakfast. That was this morning. Yes. He said nothing else. He simply reached over and took her hand where it was resting on the arm of the chair and held it with the same quiet weight as before and looked at the fire. Darius watched this. Amina felt him watching it. She did not look at him. Monique called dinner at 7:04. They moved to the table. The stew was thick and good. Monique cooked well, had always cooked well, and whatever else she had made food worth eating. Priya reappeared from the kitchen and took a seat at the far end with the body language of someone who has decided to survive the evening by minimizing surface area. Jade sat beside Amina. Taehyun sat on Amina's other side. Darius sat across from them. For the first 20 minutes, nobody said anything that mattered. The conversation was the conversation of people managing a table. The food, the weather, the snow that had started again outside, thin and directionless. Monique maintained it with professional ease, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of a woman who has learned that momentum is protection. Taehyun ate. He didn't talk during the early part of the meal. He ate with the focused attention he brought to most things. Not greedily, but completely, the way someone eats when they were raised to take food seriously. He asked Monique once if there was more bread. She got it. He thanked her without warmth and without rudeness. Darius was drinking more than he was eating. Amina tracked it peripherally. The third glass of wine poured before the main course was half done. The slight loosening in his shoulders that wine produces in men who use confidence as a primary mode of operation. She knew what was coming. She had known since Taehyun walked through the dot that Darius was going to make a choice tonight, and that the choice was going to be the wrong one, because it always was with men like him. Men who have operated their whole lives in rooms that rearrange themselves to accommodate their comfort, who do not have a well-developed instinct for when to stop. The moment came at 7:41. There had been a brief silence, the natural pause between the end of one thread of conversation and the start of another, and Darius filled it. So how'd you two meet? He said, looking at Taehyun. The question addressed to him but angled, in that precise way Darius angled things, to be about Amina, to position her as the subject of an examination. Tae-hyun looked up from his bowl. "A parking garage," he said. "Romantic," Darius said and smiled. "It worked," Tae-hyun said. Darius's smile stayed up. He turned it toward Amina. "You always did have a way of making an impression, right?" He reached for his glass. "Even back in high school, very present. People noticed you." Amina kept her eyes on her bowl. "Is that right?" Tae-hyun said. His voice had not changed in volume. It had changed in texture. Something in it had gone very still, the way water goes still before it freezes. "Oh, definitely," Darius said. He seemed to hear something in the room, but not to fully decode it. Not yet. Not with 3 glasses of wine softening the edges of his perception. "She made this big Valentine's Day move our junior year, in front of the whole school. Brave, honestly." He shook his head in the way people shake their heads when they're performing retrospective amusement. "I was not in a position to—" "Darius," Jade said quietly. "No, it's fine," Darius said. "It's ancient history. Amina knows I don't mean anything by it." He looked at her across the table. "Right? We've gotten past it." The table was completely silent. Monique was looking at her wine glass. Amina said nothing. She picked up her spoon. She set it back down. Tae-hyun set down his own spoon. He did it with a care that was itself a kind of signal, the specific, deliberate quality of a man setting something down because he needs his hands to be empty. He looked at Monique. Not Darius. "Monique." "You planned this weekend," he said. It was not a question. Monique looked up. Her composure was still there. She was good at composure, had always been good at it. But there was something behind it now, something that the quality of Tae-hyun's attention seemed to be finding regardless of what she put in front of it. "I planned a girls' trip," Monique said. That got a little complicated. "You contacted this man," Tae-hyun said, a slight tilt of his head toward Darius, "knowing his history with Amina. You arranged for them to occupy the same space. You did not tell Amina he would be here." He paused. "And at dinner last night, you encouraged him when he brought up the incident in front of other people." Monique's chin came up. "You weren't here last night." "No," Tae-hyun said. The implication of that, of what it meant that he knew the details of a dinner he hadn't attended in a cabin he hadn't been in, sat in the room like something with mass. Darius put his glass down. Some wine sloshed over the rim, and he didn't look at it. He was looking at Tae-hyun with an expression that had moved past social discomfort into something more complicated. "Who exactly are you?" Darius said. "Someone who was not here last night," Tae-hyun said. "And who is here now?" "That's not an answer. You didn't ask a question that deserves one." The air in the room was very tight. Priya had gone completely still. Jade was looking at her plate. Monique was doing the thing she did when she was regrouping. A small, controlled breath through the nose, the shoulders dropping slightly, the recalibration before the next approach. It was Monique who spoke first, and when she did, her voice had shed the social warmth and come down to something flatter and more honest. "You know what's interesting?" Monique said. She was looking at Amina now, not at Tae-hyun. "You've known this man for what? 6 weeks? 2 months? And here he is, showing up at a cabin in the mountains because you made a phone call." She paused. "You've known me for 10 years. 10 years. And you're sitting there letting him—" "Monique," Amina's voice. Monique stopped. "Don't talk about what I'm letting happen," Amina said. "You don't get to reframe this as a loyalty question, not after this weekend." "I'm just saying, Jace." "I know what you're saying," Amina said. "You've been saying it in 17 different ways since I got here. You've been saying it through Darius and through the dinner conversation and through the way you watched my face every time something landed." She looked at her directly. "You wanted to see if I'd break. You wanted to watch it, and that's not something I can unknow." Monique's face moved through something real then. Not the practiced expressions, but something underneath them, raw and briefly unguarded, and Amina saw it clearly. Saw the anger in it, yes, but also the thing underneath the anger, the thing she had named last night and now confirmed. The exhausting, corrosive presence of someone else's life that looks from a certain angle like everything yours is not. You've always been like this, Monique said, and her voice was low and close to breaking and hard at the same time, a combination that Amina understood was not performance. This, finally, was the real thing. Even when things fall apart for you, you just rebuild. You don't stay down. You don't let people see it, and then you move on, and you have this life, and this career, and now this. She stopped, started again. I have been watching you have things for 10 years, and I don't know why it doesn't get to you, why nothing gets to you. Everything gets to me, Amina said. I just don't hand it to people who would use it. The fire snapped. Outside, the snow was coming harder now. Amina could hear it against the windows, not visible yet from where she sat, just the sound of it, a faint static against the glass. Darius had gone quiet in a way that was different from his earlier performance of ease. He was sitting with his elbows on the table and his hands wrapped around his wine glass, and something in his face that was working very hard to maintain its shape. Taehyun, beside Amina, had not spoken since the exchange with Monique. He was very still. The stillness of him was one of the things that had unsettled her in the beginning, the way he could hold position while the room around him moved. But she understood it now, after 6 weeks, the way you understand the grammar of a language you've been listening to long enough. He was not removing himself from the room. He was in it completely. He was watching everything. He was simply waiting for the moment that required him, and he had not yet decided that moment had come. It was Darius who made the moment come. Maybe it was the wine. Maybe it was the specific discomfort of sitting across from a man who had looked at him with that particular quality of attention and said, "You didn't ask a question that deserves one." Maybe it was 15 years of being the quarterback, of rooms that moved for him, of confidence that had never been genuinely tested. Whatever the source, he leaned back in his chair and looked at Taehyun and said, "Look, man, I don't know who you are or what Amina told you, but this is a private thing between people who go back. He made a vague gesture. You're new here, so maybe ease up on the intensity." Taehyun looked at him. The look lasted approximately 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Darius's body, independent of his face, made several small adjustments. A slight straightening of the spine, a barely perceptible stiffening in the jaw, the involuntary physiological response of a body that has understood something the conscious mind is still catching up to. "When she stood in front of you," Taehyun said, "in that cafeteria, she was 17 years old. She told you how she felt, and you made it entertainment for the people around you." Darius opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," Taehyun said. Not loudly. The opposite of loudly. "You have spent this weekend in a cabin that was arranged for her humiliation, and you have participated in it, and you have done so with the ease of someone who has never once been asked to account for the cost of his carelessness." He paused. "I am asking now." The room had achieved a silence that had texture. Darius's face had gone through 3 different expressions in 10 seconds, and none of them had been comfortable. He found something close to his original register. The quarterback ease, the room belonging certainty, but it sat differently now, slightly misaligned, like something put back in the wrong position. "She was 17, man," Darius said. "We were kids." "She was 17 and she trusted you with something real," Taehyun said, "and you turned it into a performance for your friends. And now you are 33 years old, and you sat at this table tonight and told the story again." He looked at him steadily. "How many times in 15 years have you told that story?" Darius's jaw tightened. "Tai," Amina said, low. He looked at her, not stopping, not apologizing, but looking, genuinely looking, with the question of whether she wanted him to continue or whether she wanted to take it herself. She held his eyes for a moment. Then she looked at Darius. "You don't have to answer him," she said. "But I want to tell you something. I spent 15 years carrying that afternoon. I rearranged parts of my life around it. I don't do Valentine's Day. I don't make myself visible in certain ways. I built a lot of walls." She paused. "And I'm done doing that. So this is the last time I'm going to sit in a room while someone who was there treats it like a joke they're allowed to keep telling." Darius looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face, underneath the defensiveness, underneath the whine and the habitual confidence, something shifted, not dramatically, quietly. A man seeing, for what might have been the first time, the actual shape of a thing he had filed away as minor. "I know," he said finally. His voice came out smaller than his other voice. "I knew it then too. I just—" He stopped, looked at his hands. "I handled it badly." "Yes," Amina said. "You did." She looked at Monique. Monique was sitting with her hands folded in front of her and her eyes bright in the firelight and her composure down to its foundations. Still there, but barely. Held in place by nothing more than the discipline of someone who refuses to be the person who cries at the dinner table they set. "I owe you an apology," Monique said. Her voice was very careful. "I know that." "I know you do too," Amina said. "I'm sorry." "I hear you," Amina said. She did not say it's okay. She did not say I forgive you. She said I hear you because she did, and because she was done with what was expected of her. Taehyun reached under the table and found her hand and held it without looking at her. She felt his thumb move once across her knuckles. A small thing, deliberate, the weight of a person reminding another person they are not alone in their body right now. She held on. The clearing happened at the table. The aftermath happened outside. Amina didn't plan it. She simply reached a point, somewhere in the 20 minutes after dinner, when the table had gone quiet and people had drifted toward the kitchen and the couch, with the specific aimlessness of a gathering that has spent itself, where she needed to not be inside. She put on her coat. She stepped through the back door onto the porch. The snow was falling steadily now. Real snow, not the thin, hesitant kind from the night before, thick and slow, the kind that fills the air with a hush that is its own kind of sound. The mountain had disappeared. The trees closest to the porch were visible only as dark shapes, their branches already accumulating white. The temperature had dropped into the high 20s and the cold went directly through her coat, and she didn't care. She stood at the porch railing and looked at the snow and felt the week drain out of her, or begin to. Felt the long-held tension in her shoulders move for the first time, her chest expand past the place it had been operating from since she'd walked through that front door and seen Darius at the kitchen counter. She heard the door behind her. Tae-hyun. He came to stand beside her. He had put his coat back on. His breath made slow shapes in the cold air. He looked at the snow for a moment and then looked at her profile and said nothing. She turned to him. She looked at his face, at the particular stillness of it, the dark eyes that were very warm when they were on her and very cold when they were on everything else, at the jaw with its slight tension that was just his resting state, at the tattoos she could see on the back of his right hand where it rested on the railing, intricate and dark, against the cold reddened skin. "Tell me," she said. He looked at her. "All of it," she said. "Whatever you weren't ready to tell me before. Whatever Seokjin meant when he said you were handling something. All of it. Right now." The snow came down around them. He was quiet for a moment, the quiet of consideration, not evasion. "I run an organization," he said, "across Korea, Japan, parts of North America. What we do, the legitimate businesses are real. The shipping, the investment holdings, the real estate, all of that is real." He paused. "The rest of it is not legal, and it is not small." She looked at him and said nothing. "The people who defer to me," he said, "the cleared floors, Seokjin, all of it. It is not because I am wealthy. It is because of what I am outside the wealth." He turned to look at her directly. "You have known this for a while. I think you have known it and not asked because you were deciding how much it mattered." "I was," she said. "And now?" The snow was on his shoulders, accumulating in the dark fabric of his coat. She breathed in. The air was cold enough to feel like something solid in the lungs. "How did you know what happened at dinner last night?" she said. "Before I told you. I have people who monitor situations that involve individuals close to me," he said. "When you told me on the phone what Monique had done, I already had context. I had known about this man, Darius, for several days. I had known the shape of the weekend before you arrived." "You were watching," she said. I was protecting, he said. There's a difference. Though I understand they can feel the same from the outside. She was quiet. Are you angry? He said. She thought about it genuinely, not for performance. No, she said. I think I should probably think harder about whether I should be. But right now, no. Something in him that had been very controlled became, for just a moment, less so. It moved through his face quickly and was gone. The same thing she had seen in the car that night weeks ago. The thing that looked like relief but was deeper than relief, more structural, like the settling of a building's foundation after pressure is released. There are things about my work, he said, that I cannot protect you from knowing indefinitely. The more time we spend together, the more the two parts of my life will overlap. I want you to know that I understand what I'm asking when I tell you that. What are you asking? She said. The snow came down between them, around them, on the railing and the porch boards and in the trees beyond. I'm asking if you want to keep going, he said, knowing what going means. She looked at him. She thought about Monique inside the cabin, and Darius and the cafeteria in 2009, and the 15 years of careful structures built around a sealed place. She thought about 6 weeks of late-night drives and Korean porridge on her desk, and the sound of his voice on the phone in the dark of a mountain bedroom saying, I am, with a simplicity that had no bottom to it. She thought about what she had said to Monique tonight. Everything gets to me. I just don't hand it to people who would use it. She looked at Kang Tae-hyun and she thought, this is a man who would not use it. She was not certain of much. She had learned to be very careful about certainty, but she was certain of that. She reached up and put one hand flat against the center of his chest, over his coat, where she could feel the slow, steady beat of his heart through the layers of wool and whatever was underneath. He looked down at her hand. Then he covered it with his own, both hands, hers trapped between his palms and his chest, and held it there with a pressure that was not tight, but was very deliberate. Tell me everything else, she said. All of it. Not tonight, but everything. Yes, he said. And Tae. She looked up at him. What you said to Darius in there. Too much? He said. No, she said. Not too much. Just, she searched for it. Thank you for saying it like it was a fact, not a defense, like it was just true and you were stating it. He looked at her with that particular quality of attention, the kind that never felt like scrutiny, but always felt like seeing. It is true, he said. You don't need a defense. You never did. She felt it move through her. Whatever had been clenched the longest, the thing underneath the Valentine's Day avoidance, and the sealed places, and the careful structures. She felt it move, and her eyes went hot, and she pressed her lips together and looked away at the snow, because she was not going to do this on the porch. Not tonight. His hand came up and found her jaw, and turned her face back to him with a gentleness that had no performance in it. Hey, he said low. She looked at him. It's okay, he said. It's done now. And she let it happen. The sting behind her eyes, the one clean breath that came out ragged at the edges, the thing her body had been holding since 3 a.m. released finally into the cold and the snow and the dark air between them. He put his arms around her, one hand at the back of her head. He held her with the careful strength of someone who has been waiting to do this since he got on the helicopter. She stood in it. The snow fell. The mountain was invisible in the dark. Inside the cabin behind them, through the wall, she could hear the low sound of voices. The cabin recalibrating, moving toward whatever came next, the diminished, quieter aftermath of a room that has spent its tension. Out here, there was only the snow, only his arms and the cold, and the slow, steady sound of his heartbeat under her ear, and the knowledge, the full, unsparing, finally accepted knowledge that the man holding her in the dark was not safe, not small, not simple, and was hers completely, and she was going to have to decide what she was willing to be in the world that came with him. She already knew the answer. She had known it since the parking garage. She just hadn't let herself say it yet. They stayed on the porch until the cold became something neither of them could reasonably ignore anymore. Not long. Maybe 10 minutes. The snow had thickened into a real thing by then, the kind that accumulates visibly while you watch it, layering itself on every horizontal surface with a quiet patience that made the whole mountain feel slower and more serious. Amina's shoulders had gone rigid with the cold, but she hadn't moved, and Tae-hyun hadn't suggested she should because he understood, she had learned this about him in 6 weeks of paying attention, that she needed to stand in things until she was done standing in them. When she finally pulled back from him, she did it herself, on her own timing, and he let her go without adjustment. She looked at his face. He looked at hers. "I'm cold," she said. "Yes," he said. They went inside. The cabin had reorganized itself in their absence. Priya and Jade had migrated to the far couch with blankets and the television on low, something that wasn't being watched so much as used for its ambient sound, the way people use background noise when a room has been through something and needs a layer between itself and the silence. Priya looked up when they came in and gave Amina a look that was careful and warm and asked nothing. Jade did the same. Neither of them said anything, which Amina appreciated with a thoroughness she couldn't have fully articulated. Darius was in the kitchen. He was doing the dishes, not being directed to, not performing contrition for an audience. He was simply at the sink, sleeves pushed up, working through the dinner plates with a focus that suggested he needed something to do with his hands and had found the most honest available option. He glanced over his shoulder when he heard them come in. His eyes went to Tae-hyun first. A brief involuntary assessment, the instinct of a man recalibrating a threat level, and then to Amina, and what was in his face when he looked at her was something she hadn't expected. It was just tired. The performative ease had gone out of him, the quarterback looseness, the social voltage. He looked like a man in his 30s who had drunk too much wine and been made, over the course of an evening, to look at something he had been successfully not looking at for 15 years. He turned back to the dishes. Amina watched him for a moment. Then she went to her room. Tae-hyun followed as far as the hallway and stopped outside her door, not assuming. She looked back at him. "I just need a few minutes," she said. He nodded. She went in. She sat on the edge of the bed. She took off her boots and set them side by side against the wall with the automatic precision of someone who needs very small things to be in order when large things are not. She sat there in her socks and looked at the window, where the snow was pressing against the glass in thin, shifting lines. She thought about Monique. She thought about 10 years. The birthday calls, the emergency venting, the amber perfume. The specific comfort of a friendship that doesn't require constant maintenance. How she had read that as ease, as organic affection. How she understood now that some forms of low maintenance are not ease at all. Some are the absence of genuine investment. Some are a person keeping their options open. She thought about the kitchen this morning. She held up better than I expected. Said without guilt, said with the evaluative interest of someone watching an experiment. The grief of it was real. She let it be real here in the room because she was not going to carry it back out into the cabin and make it someone else's project to manage. She sat with the specific loss of what she had thought Monique was. The version of Monique she had constructed from a decade of proximity, which turned out to be, like most constructions, partly material and partly wishful. She grieved it for approximately 7 minutes. Then she got up, washed her face at the bathroom sink with cold water, dried it on the towel, and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired. She looked like someone who had not slept and had spent 2 days under sustained emotional pressure and had cried into a man's coat in the snow. She looked, she thought, like herself. Not the composed version, not the professional version, not the version that manages rooms, just herself. She went back out. Monique was in the main room, alone. Jade and Priya had gone to bed. Darius had finished the dishes and disappeared upstairs. Tae-hyun was at the far end of the room, standing at the window with his back to them, looking out at the snow with his hands in his pockets, present, but giving them the room in the way he gave people room when he had determined they needed it without being asked. Monique was in the chair closest to the dying fire with a glass of water instead of wine, which told Amina she had made a decision about the kind of conversation this was going to be. Amina sat across from her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire had burned down to a deep red-orange glow, mostly coals now, throwing heat without much light. The cabin was quiet around them. I've been sitting here trying to find the version of what I did that I can live with, Monique said. Her voice was flat, not emotionless. Flat in the way a voice goes flat when the emotion is too present for inflection. I've been trying to find the framing where I was just misguided, where it was about caring about you in a messed up way, where it wasn't what it actually was. And, Amina said. It was what it actually was, Monique said. Amina looked at her. I was jealous, Monique said. I have been jealous of you for I don't even know how long. I don't know when it started. At some point, I just noticed that whenever something good happened to you, I felt it like a weight. And I told myself that wasn't jealousy because we were friends, and you were supposed to root for your friends, and I did root for you. I do. She stopped, started again. I can root for you and still feel like your wins are something I'm losing. That's not rooting for someone, Amina said. That's tolerating them. Monique's jaw tightened. I know. What did you want to happen this weekend? Amina said. Specifically, what were you hoping for? Monique was quiet for a moment. I wanted to see you rattled, she said finally. I wanted to see that you weren't untouchable, that things got to you, that you weren't just this perfect composed person who moves through the world without anything sticking. She pressed her lips together. And I knew exactly what would rattle you, because you told me years ago about what happened in the cafeteria. You told me how much it cost you, and I stored it, and this weekend I used it. Amina sat with that, not reacting, not yet, letting it be the full thing it was. That is one of the more honest things you've said to me in a long time, Amina said. Yeah. It doesn't make it better. No, Monique said. I know. Amina looked at the coals. The heat coming off them was dry and steady. I'm not untouchable, Amina said. I'm very touchable. I just don't let people see it. And I don't let people see it because the people I've let see it have used it, twice now, that I can count. In a cafeteria when I was 17, and in a mountain cabin when I was 33. She looked at Monique directly. You want to know what that costs? Every year rebuilding the capacity to trust someone with something real? It costs everything. It is slow and it is exhausting, and some years I can do it less than others. Monique's eyes were very bright. I'm sorry, she said. I'm genuinely... Amina, I am genuinely sorry. I know you are, Amina said. I can see it. Right now, in this conversation, I believe that you mean it. She paused. But I also know that being sorry doesn't change what you're capable of. It doesn't change that you looked at something I trusted you with and saw a weapon. She said it without heat, without cruelty. The way you say something that is simply true. I can't unknow that. Monique looked at her. I'm not angry, Amina said. I want you to know that. I'm not going to spend energy being angry, but I am done. This friendship is done, and I need you to hear that without trying to fix it, because it's not fixable, and trying to fix it is just another way of making this about what you need. The room was very quiet. The fire breathed its last visible flame and went to pure coals, deep red and silent. Monique nodded, a small, single movement. Her eyes spilled, and she didn't move to wipe them. And Amina watched her not wipe them, and understood that this, finally, was the real thing. Not performance, not the version that served a purpose, but the actual grief of a woman who had burned down something real and was sitting in the remains of it. Okay, Monique said. Her voice was barely there. Okay, Amina said. She got up. She stood for a moment looking at Monique in the chair with the dying fire behind her and thought about 10 years, one more time, let herself have the full weight of it. Then she walked away. Taehyun was still at the window when she came to stand beside him. Outside, the snow had gone serious. It was coming down in thick, unhurried sheets now, the kind of snow that doesn't ask permission, the kind that will have changed the entire face of the mountain by morning. The driveway was already invisible under it. The trees were white to their midsections. Seokjin, she said. He's in the car, Taehyun said. He's fine. He has a thermos. She almost laughed. It came out as something smaller. Not quite a laugh, more like the shape of one. Can you get him inside? She said. Please? It's absurd to leave him out there. Taehyun looked at her. Something moved through his expression, something warm and brief that she had learned to catch. He'll refuse, he said. Tell him I asked. A pause. Then he took out his phone and typed a brief message. 40 seconds later, the front door opened and Han Seok-jin came in with snow on his shoulders and a thermos under his arm, looking neither inconvenienced nor particularly grateful. He gave Amina a short, formal nod. She nodded back. There's stew on the stove, she said. It's probably still warm. He looked at her. Go, she said. He went. Taehyun watched this with that quality of attention he brought to things that surprised him. Absorbed, quiet, not quite smiling. He listens to you, he said. He listened to common sense, she said, which happened to be coming from me. They stood together at the window and watched the snow for a while. Tonight, she said, when you talked to Darius, the thing you said about what it cost, about how many times in 15 years he'd told that story. She paused. How did you know to say it like that? Taehyun considered. Because men like that, he said carefully, do not think of these things as significant. They carry them lightly. They take them out occasionally, dust them off, put them away. They do not understand that the person who was the subject of the story has been carrying the same weight without the option of setting it down. He was quiet for a moment. I have known men like that. I have had to understand how they think. In your work, she said. In my work, he said. She looked at his profile, the jaw, the line of his nose, the specific stillness of his face in the window's cold light with the snow beyond it. Tell me the rest of it, she said. Not the shape of it. I know the shape. Tell me what it means for us, practically, what it means for my life. He turned from the window to face her fully. He gave her the attention she was asking for. Complete, undeflected, the quality of a man who does not protect himself from difficult conversations by making them easier than they are. It means there are people who would use you to reach me, he said. Not many. The significant threats I manage. It is what Seok-jin is for, and others like him, but the risk is not zero. He paused. It means there are parts of my business you will never fully know, not because I don't trust you, but because knowledge is its own kind of risk. It means that some of what I do is not something I can defend to you, and I won't try, and you will have to decide if you can live alongside that without it corroding what we have. She looked at him. It also means, he said, and his voice shifted. The same words, the same measured pace, but something in it opened. That I have not wanted anything the way I want this to work. I have built things. I have protected things. I have never had something I wanted to protect that was also something I could lose to my own choices. He looked at her steadily. You are that, for me, and I am aware of what I'm asking. The snow came down outside. I'm not asking you for easy, she said. I'm asking you for honest. I know, he said. And you can do that? I can do that, he said. It is the other things I struggle with. What other things? He was quiet for a moment. Letting things matter, he said. I'm better at protecting things than at letting them matter. I have spent a long time making sure that the things that matter most to me are not visible to people who would use them. He looked at her. You are very visible. I haven't found a way around that. She understood what that cost him to say. She understood it the way you understand things that live in the body before they arrive in language. Good, she said. He looked at her. I don't want to be managed, she said. I don't want to be kept safe by being kept at a distance. I've done that. I built a life doing that. She reached out and put her hand against the side of his face, the angle of his jaw, rough from the day, warm under her palm despite the cold coming off the window behind him. I want to be in it, whatever in it means. He turned his face slightly into her hand. 1 degree, the smallest possible movement. It will be complicated, he said. Everything real is, she said. He covered her hand with his, held it against his jaw. Amina, he said. Yeah, she said. I love you, he said, He said it the way he said things that were simply true, without build-up, without performance, without the architecture of a moment. He said it as information, as something that had been the case for long enough that stating it was just catching the words up to the reality. She felt it in her chest, deep and clean. "I know," she said. Then, "I love you too." She said it like that, like it was already a fact she was confirming rather than a risk she was taking, because that was what it was. He kissed her. Briefly, there by the window with the snow coming down on the other side of the glass, and the fire gone to coals and the cabin quiet around them. Brief and certain. The kiss of two people who have stopped negotiating. Morning came white and slow and enormous. Amina woke before anyone else and lay still for a moment in the bed that wasn't hers, in the room that had tried to be a punishment and had ended up being something else entirely, looking at the ceiling and listening to the mountain's winter silence. Snow silence. The particular acoustics of a landscape that has been padded and muffled and remade. Everything soft. Everything slightly foreign. She felt with a specificity that surprised her. Okay. Not resolved, not clean, not the artificial lightness of a problem declared finished. Just, okay. In the solid way of someone who has put down something they've been carrying for a long time and has discovered that their body still remembers how to stand without it. She got up. She made coffee in the cabin's kitchen, alone, while the morning came in through the windows, blue, white, and stark. She stood at the counter and drank the first cup in silence and watched the snow-covered mountain assert itself in the growing light, the trees loaded heavy with white, the sky above them going from gray to a cold, clear blue. Seokjin appeared at 7:15. He had apparently spent the night on the couch in the front room without complaint, which told her everything about his relationship to comfort and duty. He accepted coffee without comment and stood at the far end of the counter and looked out the window with the same vigilance he brought to everything. And Amina found that she didn't mind his presence. He was, she was coming to understand, simply part of the world she had decided to enter. A fixed object in the landscape. Taehyun came out at 7:40. His hair was not yet pushed back, which was the only condition in which she had ever seen him look anything less than fully composed, and she found it disproportionately endearing. He found her eyes first, across the kitchen. She lifted her mug toward him, a small, wordless offer. He came and poured his own coffee and stood beside her. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. Darius came downstairs at 8. He was packed. His bag was over his shoulder and he was wearing his coat already, and he moved through the cabin with the body language of someone who has made a decision and is acting on it before he can change his mind. He stopped when he reached the kitchen. He looked at Amina. She looked at him. He set his bag down. He ran one hand over the back of his neck, a gesture she recognized from a different time as the thing he did when he was uncomfortable. And he looked at her with an expression that had none of the previous iterations in it. Not the quarterback ease, not the wine-loosened retrospective amusement, not the defensive recalibration after Taehyun's words at the dinner table. Just a man. 33 years old, looking at a woman he had hurt when they were both younger, in the plain morning light. "I've been thinking about what to say since about 2 in the morning, he said. "You don't need to say anything," Amina said. "I want to," he said. "And I'm not going to make you listen to a long version of it, because I don't think you should have to do that." He looked at her steadily. "I'm sorry. For the cafeteria. For the way I handled it, and for the laugh, and for every time since then that I've told the story at a dinner or at a bar like it was just a funny thing from high school." He paused. "It wasn't a funny thing. I knew it then, and I made a choice, and I've spent 15 years not looking at what kind of choice that was." Amina was quiet. "Your man said something last night," Darius said. He didn't look at Taehyun, but his chin moved slightly in the direction of where he stood. "About what I was carrying lightly and what you didn't have the option of putting down." A pause. "I've been thinking about that." "And," Amina said, "and I think I owe you more than a dinner table apology," he said, "but I don't know what more looks like. I don't think I'm in a position to offer something that would fix anything." He looked at her. "I just didn't want to leave without you knowing that I know. What I did, what it cost you, that I know it." Amina looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the cafeteria. She thought about the specific quality of that laugh, the way it had moved outward from his table, the way sound works in enclosed spaces, finding every corner. She thought about the fact that she was 33 years old and standing in a mountain cabin the morning after the worst and the best. 48 hours she'd had in recent memory, and she was not the girl from the cafeteria anymore. Had not been for a long time. Had been other things instead, careful, contained, walled in specific ways, but not that girl. And she thought about what it would cost her to carry Darius Cole as a wound for one more year, one more decade, one more careful avoidance of February 14th. "I accept your apology," she said. He looked at her. "Not because everything's even," she said. "Not because it didn't matter, but because I'm done spending energy on it. I'm not carrying this anymore, and I'm not letting it be a thing that lives in my body." She looked at him steadily. "You're forgiven. Not because you deserve it right this minute, because I need the room back." He was very still. "Okay," he said. His voice was rough at the edges. "Go home, Darius," she said. He picked up his bag. He walked toward the front door and then stopped, half-turned, looked back at her one more time with his hand on the doorframe. "That man," he said, and tilted his head again, and this time there was something in it that was not competitive, not territorial, just honest. "He came here for you, on a helicopter, in a snowstorm." He looked at her. "That's something." "I know," she said. He nodded. He left. The front door closed behind him, and the cabin took back its quiet, and Amina stood in the kitchen with her coffee and felt the specific lightness of something she had been carrying for 15 years click open in her chest one last time and release. Monique left at 9. She came through the kitchen with her bag and her coat and her composure, reduced from its usual full height but present, reconstructed enough to function. She stopped beside Amina. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't try to leave the door open or plant the seed of a future conversation. She looked at Amina the way someone looks when they understand that looking is all they're entitled to. "Take care of yourself," Monique said. "I will," Amina said. Monique left. Jade, who had been in the kitchen quietly making herself toast, watched the front door close and then looked at Amina with an expression that was entirely on her side. "Good riddance," Jade said mildly. Amina laughed, a real one. It surprised her, the fullness of it. "Yeah," she said. Jade pointed at her with the butter knife. "For what it's worth, and I know it's not worth a lot at this point, you were remarkable this whole weekend. I want you to know I was watching and I saw it." "I saw you watching," Amina said. "I needed that more than you know." Jade nodded, matter of fact, the way she accepted acknowledgement, directly, without deflecting. "Good. Now, can your very large, very intimidating boyfriend please eat something? He had half a cup of coffee, and he looks like he's running on whatever people like him run on, and I find it concerning." Amina looked across the open kitchen to where Tae-hyun stood at the window again. His position of default in this cabin, she had noticed, always with sight lines to the drive and the tree line, and she said, "Tae." He turned. "Come eat breakfast," she said. A pause. Seok-jin, at the counter, looked at his thermos. "There's enough for both of you," Amina said to both of them. They ate breakfast. All four of them. Around the kitchen table, with snow outside and coffee and eggs Jade cooked because she said it was the most useful thing she could do, and the cabin was quiet and bright with the reflected light off the mountain's new white. It was, Amina thought, almost ordinary. She thought about that, about how you could arrive at ordinary on the other side of almost anything if you moved through it instead of around it. About how ordinary had its own weight, its own specific comfort, not the thrilling uncertainty of the beginning of something, not the crisis clarity of the last 48 hours, but the livable, sustainable warmth of people eating eggs at a table while snow lay on a mountain. She wanted that. She understood, for the first time without qualification, that she wanted it. Not the careful, preserved version of her current life. Not the managed, walled, sealed version. The real one. Complicated and costly and capable of morning tables like this one. After breakfast, Seok-jin cleared the plates. He did it with the same efficiency he brought to everything, and nobody commented on it, and Amina noted privately that this was a person she was going to need to understand better. Not because he was a threat, because he mattered to Taehyun in a way that was not simple, and things that mattered to Taehyun were going to matter to her. Jade left at 11. She hugged Amina for a long time at the front door. "Call me," Jade said. "I will," Amina said. She meant it. They were alone in the cabin after that. Taehyun and Amina and Seok-jin, who had gone to the car to make phone calls, and the snow-covered mountain, and the quiet. Amina sat down on the couch in front of the fireplace. She had rebuilt the fire while the others ate, had found the wood stacked by the back door and rebuilt it from scratch. And it was going properly now, warm and orange and real. She sat with her feet tucked up under her and her coffee and the fire and looked at it. Taehyun sat beside her. Not across from her. Beside her, close, his arm along the back of the couch so she was within the bracket of it without being enclosed by it. "Question," she said. "Yes," he said. "The cabin," she said. "Monique rented it, but Seok-jin knew we were here from essentially the beginning. Does your organization have any connection to this property?" A pause. "The management company that rents it," he said carefully, "has a parent company that has a holding relationship with one of our subsidiary real estate entities in Georgia." She looked at him. "It's a large portfolio," he said. "Taehyun." "Yes." "Do you own half of Atlanta?" A longer pause. "Not half." She pressed her lips together. "This is going to be a very steep learning curve," she said. "Yes," he said. "I expect it will be." "And you're prepared for that? For me asking questions and needing actual answers?" "I'm prepared for that," he said. "I have been preparing for you specifically for approximately 6 weeks. She looked at him. "That's the most romantic thing you've said to me." "I can do better," he said. "Don't," she said. "I like that one." He almost smiled. The full version this time on. It reached his eyes, briefly, before it settled back. She had been collecting those. She had a small private archive of them. She leaned into him, let her head find the angle of his shoulder and settle there. He moved his arm from the back of the couch to around her. The shift natural and easy, two people who have learned each other's geometry. They sat with the fire. Outside, the snow was still going, slower now, the mountain taking its final layer of white. The trees were heavy and still. The sky had gone a pale, luminous gray that in February means the snow is almost done. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Ask," he said. "Last night you said you loved me," she said. "In the context of also telling me that you run what is essentially a criminal organization across multiple countries and that there are people who would use me to reach you." She paused. "I need you to understand that those two things live in the same sentence for me now. I'm not separating them out. I'm not filing one under love and one under risk and keeping them in different drawers. It's one thing." He was quiet. "And I'm choosing it," she said. "The whole one thing. But I need you to know I see it clearly. I'm not coming in blind, and I'm not coming in assuming that love makes the complicated parts simple." She looked up at him. "Can you live with someone who sees all of it?" He looked down at her. "I have been afraid," he said, "for a long time, of exactly that, of someone seeing all of it." He paused. "Not because I am ashamed. I made choices. I understand what they are. But because all of it is not easy to be beside, and I did not know how to be with someone while also being everything I am, without one eventually destroying the other." "And now?" she said. "Now," he said, "I think the only person I've met who could be beside it is someone who sees it exactly as it is and still chooses." He looked at her. "You are the first person who has done that." She held his eyes. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They stayed there with the fire going and the snow coming down its last slow inches and the mountain quiet and enormous outside the windows. A year later, on a February afternoon that came in gray and cold and bright at the edges, the way Atlanta winters sometimes do, Amina drove north on a road she had driven once before. She drove it differently now. A year is not a small thing between two people who have decided to see each other clearly. A year contains the ordinary and the extraordinary in roughly equal measure, and the texture of her life had changed so significantly that she sometimes caught herself looking at it from the outside with the wondering attention of someone who has moved into a house that is too good for what they expected and has not yet fully accepted that they live there now. She knew more. She knew the shape of Tae-hyun's world. Not all of it, not the operational details she understood she was not supposed to carry, but the outline of it, the weight of it, the specific way it made him who he was, and the specific ways it cost him things he didn't talk about. She had met Seokjin's formality and found that it contained underneath its surface a quality of attentive care that was its own language. She had learned that Tae-hyun's penthouse had a kitchen that was the truest room in it, where he was most himself, most available, where the controlled stillness of him in public became something else, quieter and more human. She had moved in at the end of the summer, not dramatically. She had moved her things over the course of 3 weekends, box by box, her belongings finding their places in the rooms of someone else's space, and the space adjusting around them, and both of them adjusting. It was not easy. There were nights when the difference in their worlds made the distance between them feel like a physical thing. There were mornings when she woke up in a bed that cost more than her first car and felt the specific vertigo of a life that had happened faster than she had planned. And there were other mornings, the majority of them, when she woke up to the sound of him in the kitchen, the specific sounds of someone who cooks from memory, by feel, by the recipe his grandmother gave him, in a language Amina was beginning, slowly, to learn. And the whole apartment smelled of something real, and she lay there in the good light of the high windows and felt the solid, ordinary warmth of a life that was actually being lived. She had rebuilt her client list from Decatur to Buckhead. She had taken on 2 new accounts and let go of one that had been grinding her down for years. She had called her sister more. She had, in November, told her mother the full truth about who Tae-hyun was, what he was, and her mother had been quiet for a long time on the phone, and then had said, "Does he treat you like you matter?" And Amina had said yes. And her mother had said, "Then I'll hold my concerns and you'll hold your eyes open and we'll both do our jobs." Which was, Amina thought, the most her mother had ever been herself in a single statement. She had not spoken to Monique, not once, in a year. She had not felt the absence the way she had feared she would, the fear being that without Monique's particular brand of familiar ease, there would be a hole that asked to be filled. But the hole had not appeared. What appeared instead was space. Clean, available space, the kind that makes room for things you didn't know you wanted. She had started spending more time with Jade. She had reconnected with a college friend she had let the friendship lapse with years ago. She was building something less convenient and more genuine. She had received one text from Darius in October. It said, "I hope things are good. I've been thinking about what you said, about needing the room back. I think I'm working on that too." She had responded, "I'm glad," and meant it, and let it close there. The cabin appeared ahead of her through the trees, at the end of the drive. She pulled in. She sat for a moment with the engine running. It looked different in the daylight of a clear February afternoon. The snow was thinner than it had been a year ago, just a cover on the ground and in the trees, not the serious overnight accumulation that had remade the mountain. The cabin's windows were lit from inside, smoke from the chimney. She heard a car on the drive behind her. Familiar, silent the way expensive things are silent, and she turned off her engine. Tae-hyun pulled in beside her. He got out. He was in the black cashmere coat, same as last year, the one she had seen from the window before she understood what she was watching. He looked at her over the roof of her car with his dark eyes, and the particular expression that meant he was taking in her face in full. "You're here first," he said. "I drove faster," she said. "I don't know what to do with that information," he said. "Yes, you do," she said. "You're horrified. It's very charming." He came around the car to her. He was carrying something, a small bag, and in his other hand a white box, the size of something you'd put a necklace in. She looked at it. "Not yet," he said. "Inside first." "Okay," she said. They went in. The cabin was theirs now. He had purchased it in the spring, which she had found out after the fact, and had argued with him about for approximately 45 minutes before acknowledging that the argument was primarily about the principle and not about the outcome, and that she was actually glad the place existed in their possession rather than in the memory of someone else's bad intentions. She had painted it in September. Just the main room, a warm sand color that caught the firelight differently. She had chosen it herself. He had helped her tape the trim. The fire was already going. Deokjin, she understood, would have arrived earlier to open the place and get it ready, and would now be somewhere that was not here for the next 24 hours, which she understood was his gift to them. She took off her coat. She put it on the hook by the door. Taehyun built the fire up, added 2 logs with the easy efficiency of someone who has spent the past year learning a cabin-specific draft, and came to sit beside her on the couch, which was new, which they had bought together from a place in Buckhead, which was a deeply ordinary thing to have done and which she treasured for exactly that reason. He set the white box on the low table in front of them. She looked at it. "I want to tell you something before you open that," he said. She looked at him. "I have spent a long time," he said, "being very clear about what I am. I have found that clarity useful because it removes certain possibilities. People know what they are dealing with, and they make their choices, and there is no false pretending on either side." He looked at her steadily. "I have not known what to do with a person who saw all of it and stayed. I have been, over the past year, learning." "Learning what?" she said. "Learning to let things be good," he said, "without waiting for the cost, without managing in advance for the way it ends." He paused. "I have been afraid of this specific thing for a very long time. Being afraid has not made me less afraid, but it has made me very tired." He looked at the fire briefly, then back to her. "I am less afraid now than I was a year ago. I think you are responsible for that." She was very still. "Open it," he said. She reached for the box. Inside, on a bed of white silk, a necklace, white gold, a pendant, a lotus, small and precise, its petals rendered with an intricacy that suggested something handmade, or made with the attention of someone who had been very specific about what they asked for. She looked at it for a long time. "It's not a ring," he said. "I know that. I'm not asking that question tonight. I'm not asking it until you're ready to hear it, and you will know when that is before I do, and I'll know by watching your face." He paused. "But I'm asking the question before that question. The one that says, this is where I intend to be. This is the person I intend to be here with. I want you to have something that says it on a night that 1 year ago was the beginning of something I hadn't planned on and cannot imagine having not had." Her eyes were warm. Not spilling, she had gotten better at managing that, not suppressing it, but holding it, letting herself feel the full heat of it without being swept. "Taehyun," she said. "Yes," he said. "Put it on me," she said. He took the necklace from the box. She turned, lifting her hair. His hands were at the back of her neck. Careful, warm, more careful than the situation technically required, the care of someone for whom this specific gesture carries the full weight of what it represents. The clasp settled. She let her hair fall. She turned back to him. He looked at the necklace where it rested against her chest, and then at her face, and she watched him do it. Watched him let it matter, visibly, with the still openness of a person who has been learning, over the course of a year, to let things land. "Thank you," she said. "No," he said quietly. "Thank you." She kissed him. This one was not brief. It was the length of something that has been long enough in the building that it doesn't need to stop quickly to prove anything. When she pulled back, the fire was good, and the mountain was quiet outside, and the snow on the ground was catching the last of the day's light in a way that made the whole visible world look briefly like it was made of something soft. She leaned back into his side, his arm around her, his hand, the one with the tattoos she had long since memorized, resting on her knee with a familiar, unremarkable weight. "One day," she said, "when I'm ready." "One day," he agreed. Outside, the Blue Ridge evening came down blue and cold and clear, and the snow lay quietly on the ground where a year ago they had stood in it while it fell, and inside the cabin a fire burned in a room that had been repainted and furnished and made into something that belonged to both of them equally, which was, when she thought about it, the truest definition of what had happened between them. Not rescue, not transformation into something easier or simpler, just 2 people, imperfect and decided, who had looked at each other in the full light and said, yes, all of it, and meant it, and were sitting now in the warmth of that choice. The fire burned on. The mountain held its winter silence, and Amina Brooks, who had spent 15 years building careful walls around a sealed wound, sat in a cabin that was hers now with her hand over a man's tattooed hand on her knee, wearing a lotus at her throat and carrying nothing she hadn't chosen to carry. That was enough. That was in every way that mattered more than enough.